beautiful, but then I wonder if, at what age a child is willing or will balk at wearing that dress that the mother or the grandmother thinks is absolutely the dress that she should wear. And have you come across this sort of thing with your clients?
I think that the difference is that if a child is validated and feels as though they are heard, let it be. It doesn't have to be a dress, it could be any aspect of their lives. That child is going to be more willing to communicate with the adult in the family about what is going to be worn. And I also think that you have to listen to the child's opinion. After all, you want this child to grow up with some self-esteem and feeling of importance. So you have to listen to what they're talking about. Now, mind you, if you have a 9-year-old who wants to look like a streetwalker, now you have to step in and say, I'm sorry, this is not possible. But if we're talking about the difference between, say, 3 or 4 dresses are presented of mine, let's say 3 or 4 of mine are presented. The mother wants this one, the child wants this one. They're not agreeing here. Well, how bad could, if there are 4 of mine, how bad could it be, you know? So
They're 4 of yours.
So
yeah.
You have to, I encourage the parents to pay some attention to the kids' wishes, you know, but I have seen...
Have there been screaming fits and so forth, or...?
Once in a while, I will see, at a trunk show, which is the only time that I really get to meet them, I will see a very unhappy child because the child isn't being heard and the parent is doing what she wants to do about this thing. Now, especially if it's the child's party, say a communion dress, and it's the child's communion dress, or a dress for a bat mitzvah, and it's the child's bat mitzvah and all. You have to listen to what, after all, they are little people who have opinions about things, and I think you have to listen to them.
Right.
We find the children who love our dresses really love them, and they are so thrilled to have them on. Occasionally we find one who is unwilling to cooperate, and I will say to them, I need to see this dress on somebody because I've not seen it on anybody yet, which is probably true, and I would very much like you to try this on for me. They don't say no to me. They do not say no.
So you play the psychologist a bit in this sort of thing.
Yeah. I read a book a long time ago by Chaim Gnat. It was the best thing I ever read.
Yes,
it's
I know
all
that
about
book.
validating
My
little
mother-in-law
people.
had me read that book.
Best book ever written.
I'm just curious about this whole little girl aesthetic. You know, the idea of the little girl as the little princess, and the mother wanting her daughter to look like a little princess. It seems to me that that's an age-old fantasy, and maybe it was strongest in the Victorian era, and that this is sort of a throwback in a way to that aesthetic of the little girl as princess, the perfect little girl. And I wonder if you think about that at all when you're designing. Is this a fantasy of what the little girl should be? And I also wonder, because in our society, the notion of femininity is so vexed and complex that when you design for a little girl, you're also designing for the mother's notion of what a little girl, and perhaps what she herself wants to be. And how do you work with that? I mean, it seems to me it's a really complex sort of thing, dealing with femininity. I know my question isn't completely clear, and
it's really quite good. Your question is good. And I would say this, that first of all, in my 31 years of doing this, I've met many little girls who are now big girls, and I sometimes meet the big girls who say, oh my God, I had your dress when I was little, and I love that dress. I see a cord that runs through all of the feminine little or big people that I know. You will find that they all have this thing about the feminine spirit. It comes with the packaging. Now, in my experience with the people who come to me, most of the children are very much in awe of the idea of having the dress swirling around, touching it. They love themselves in these dresses.
The princess dress, being the little princess.
Perhaps, but it doesn't seem to be anything that's encouraged by the mother. It's the child. We have children who model for us who love doing this. and they are so excited about trying on all the dresses and posing in front of the camera. It comes with the territory in a lot of cases.
So you think it's part of the very nature of being a girl?
I do.
I love being a girl.
I do.
But, you know, you brought up something about the 9-year-old who shouldn't look like a vamp, in your opinion.
Definitely.
But the other side of this is the whole Britney Spears thing, which is the little girl, and Joan Benet going, you know, back to something a little more morbid. The idea of the little girl as a vampish sexual object. And it seems to me interesting that, I mean, your aesthetic is very proper, very Victorian. But in the Victorian time, there was this dichotomy where you had the angel and the whore, you know, the Madonna and the prostitute. And it was like women were divided into those two types. So it seems to me that there is some kind of odd symbiosis between the two. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, how many hours have we got to
I know, it's a big question.
Well, first of all, to start off with, I am sorry that young people today are using for role models people who find it so important to expose their bodies in a way that makes them, in my opinion, seems very cheap. I don't appreciate this, and I'm sorry that children are looking up to these people as role models. First of all, I wonder which of them is going to be remembered. Grace Kelly, hello? Is there another face that ever came along? Is there a classy, beautiful woman like that alive today?
Well, it's funny you mentioned
so.
Grace Kelly, because some of these dresses for little girls do remind me of dresses that Grace Kelly wore in Rear Window, for
example.
The
other beautiful lady, Audrey Hepburn, those are my role models. So I come from a different age group, and I can't change. My father used to say to me, look, I'm a Victorian gentleman, and I'm going to be that, and you're a modern 20th century lady, and we're going to get along just fine if you let me be me and you be you. And that's what it's all about. I cannot do anything differently than what I'm doing, because this is who I am.
And this is how you see the world.
It's how I see it.
And yet, would you say, Joan, that there's an interesting tension between this very ethereal aesthetic that you have and probably the pretty cutthroat world in which you operate as a businesswoman in competition with very in very upscale stores which are demanding and so forth? I mean, do you feel that you have to be a tough woman to do that well?
We will ask some of the people I deal with, and I'm sure they will tell you. I know what they'll tell you. They'll say, she's tough, she's a bottom liner, you can trust her, she's to the point, she's honest. That's what they're going to say. If they're afraid of strong women, God knows what they say. I don't, but it doesn't matter to me, because I know what I'm doing is the right thing to do. We have a following, we're always going to have it, it doesn't ever change. And I would not, by the way, say that my designs resemble Victorian in any way, because Victorian is rather elaborately executed, and mine tend to be more simplistic. What I would call them is classic, with a twist. So whatever is going on at the time in fashion, I will incorporate in some way into the design, in some detail.
You mean you're inspired by what you see around you?
Absolutely. I would be inspired by it. And I would want to be in keeping with the program, so to speak, the present program. However, mine are not victims, shall we say, of the current trend. And in fact, my things are not trendy at all. Those things have a tendency to have a very short cycle. And we just can't live like that. Our things have to have a little bit more of a timeless feeling. People appreciate that.
Especially since, as you say, they're going to be passed on to the next generation.
Yeah.
When you look in this gallery, I was very pleased to think that you were going to be here, because we do have some paintings in this gallery, some of which feature children. I don't know whether any of them spark thoughts for you about designs that either you've done or you might do. Do they seem to you classic in the sense that your designs seem, or very much of their time?
I would say they would strike me as very much of their time. However, I am a person who does a lot of research, and inspiration can come from just about any place. But I called some years ago, well, first of all, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I have several pieces in the Metropolitan Museum's permanent collection in their Costume Institute.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And because I have pieces in there, this is a whole process. It was accepted by the board of directors, and it was a whole big process, and I'm very honored about that. But because I do have these pieces, I am allowed to go into the archives, and this is really quite a fabulous thing to do, talk about inspiration. But I think the oldest garment in there is hundreds of years old. You cannot just go in there and wander around. It's all kept a certain temperature. You've got to wear latex gloves, and they have a guard there, and you have to touch things a certain way, take them out a certain way, and put them back a certain way, and it's all very clinical. And the reason that I would go there is to be inspired, to see exactly what took place. It can never hurt, to find out these things. Never know.
Is there a particular dress that you saw at the Metropolitan that has inspired anything you've done recently?
Oh, gosh, it's hard for me to really remember. I would say that looking at some of Coco Chanel's things, I felt inspired. Certainly looking at some of Schiaparelli's, I felt inspired. But you just never know. A little detail here, a pocket here, something here, a jewel.
You put it together in some sort of new way.
But it may not be something that you are ever... First of all, we don't copy anything. Mm-hmm. I don't do that. But you never know how it's going to come out. I have a theory that my body is just used, it's just used for the purpose of designing. God said, okay, you will be a designer, and that's it. And I sometimes think, well, there's a hole in the top of my head, and this inspiration and then comes out of my hands. Like, this body has nothing to do with it. There's another force coming to do it, And that's how I describe this creative process. It's the easiest thing I do. And I cannot tell you, it's just...
It comes naturally to you.
It's constantly looking at everything.
When you mentioned the Met, I want to tell you that we have a collection here at Drexel that you may not know about. An extraordinary collection
I didn't.
That you should look through. Some of them are hundreds of years old, beautifully preserved gowns and dresses and so forth that I know that they have occasional displays, and I think they would inspire you.
I would love to see those.
I'll take you for a tour sometime.
All right.
But tell us a little bit. I mean, we're nearing the end of our time, but tell us a little bit about some of the designers that you admire most. I imagine as a woman, you are in the minority as a designer. I mean, you'd think there would be more, but from my limited experience, it seems that men tend to be more at the forefront in terms of design, at least traditionally. Could you tell us some of the people who have inspired you, male or female?
Well, I would say that for women's clothing, I love Valentino. Mm-hmm. I also like Calvin Klein things. They're very simple, and that's what I end up buying for myself. Now, I'm a little person. You would think it's not going to work for her, but if I have to do a gown, all it's going to ever be is a simple hunk of jersey, and if I lose a little bit of weight here, I can continue to do that.
Yeah.
And just draped around the body in a most feminine, sexy manner. Mm-hmm. End of story. For me, that is what works for me.
Very different than from your children's designs.
Yes, because I know the limitations of being a little person, and I think that's how I look best. Okay. However, I love what Valentino does. I love Chanel. For suiting, I do like Giorgio Armani. Uh-huh. I think his cuts are very feminine. They're soft. In a suit, I don't like anything that's structured or heavy looking or it makes you look tough. I hated when they used to put the military things on the shoulders a few years ago. Oh my God, I thought, why do we have to look like soldiers,
Right.
Who else do I love? Gosh.
Well, yes, you have given me a good overview.
Okay.
And a wonderful sense of your creativity and your sense of design. I really appreciate your being here today.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us today at the Drexel interview.